Hello, my name's Joshua Mcclelland, and you're listening to Josh Talks. Today I'm here with Adam Mcclelland. Adam's played for Ballymena Reserves, he's played for Ballyclare Reserves, and he's also played for Moyola. Adam, why don't you tell everybody listening a wee bit about yourself?
Hello everyone, I'm Adam. I'm 21 years old and I've played a wee bit of football. Probably better as a kid playing football, but nonetheless I'm still playing now, still trying to play anyway.
So, Adam, tell me about how you first started playing football.
Well, I've been playing football since no age. As soon as I could lift the ball, I was playing. As soon as I could kick, I was playing. Um, I remember just being out the back garden every day from about 3 years old, just playing, and that would happen up all the way through school until we moved house, and then at about 7, I started playing for Chimney Corner and quickly moved up age groups.
Just on that, obviously for the people listening, you'd be my brother, and I remember from a very early age you were playing with my friends, and my friends were older than me, so you're always playing 5, 6, 7 years up, even as a very young kid, and you never looked out of place.
Yeah, I remember. I know what you're talking about playing with your mates, because I remember in school, me and Josh went to the same school, and although I was P2 and you were P7 or P6, I remember playing with the older guys in school and thinking, well, these boys are terrible. But no, yeah, when I went to Chimney Corner, I was 7, and I ended up moving up fairly quickly. I moved up to the under 11, so the year below you, and played a good few games with them, and then moved on.
And then the next team you played for was Springfield Star.
Yeah, moved to Springfield Star up just past the Shangle, and in my opinion, we were the best team in the country. um, we had a whole lot of players that have went across the water and came home, and players who have played for the likes of Northern Ireland, and we were a good side. I was probably one of the worst players there, but nonetheless, we were a good side.
And then after Springfield Star, you moved to Whitewell.
Yeah, went to Whitewell, followed our dad. He moved to Whitewell just to start up his own wee team, and him and Johnny, and then we moved to the Grove, and it was really enjoyable. A good few years playing football, but at the same time we were playing East Antrim League, and like, the standard wasn't great. Like we won or came second or won the Rose Bowl, I can't really remember, but the standard of football wasn't great, and I thought I could challenge myself a wee bit, so then I moved to Ballymena.
Just on Ballymena, I think you make a really good point there just about the standard. And I think for anyone listening who maybe has young children or even kids who are coming up through academies, if you think your child's got that ability, it's important to push them on to Irish League teams or teams that are playing at a high standard because one, the coaching is better and they're playing with kids who are on the same level as themselves and playing kids who are maybe better than them. And you started to see, like, I know as soon as you moved to Ballymena, your standard of football drastically improved because you were playing with kids who were just as good as you.
Yeah, yeah. The first game at Ballymena we played against Magerfeldt Sky Blues, and that was under 15. And I remember thinking, well, these boys that we're playing against, they're not great, but everyone around me, they're good players. And it wasn't really like that playing for Grove and Whitewell. Like most of the players you were playing with they were decent, like, but they weren't national league standard, sort of thing.
Yeah, I think that's very important because there is a massive difference between the leagues, especially in the National League, because then you've got the likes of your Linfield and your Glentorans and your Crusaders. And what people don't realize is that from a very young age, those kids are brought in from across the country. That there's some kids there who would be in high demand and they would maybe have about 5, 6 teams after them.
Yeah, well, my advice would be to anyone that has kids, push them as far as they want to go. I know, although Daddy was the coach at Whitewell and Grove, he didn't stop me from moving the ball. I mean, when I thought the time was right, and I ended up Whitewell then folded. And although that was a sad time, especially for the likes of Johnny and Alan Daddy, because he'd been in it for so long, but I just felt like, you know, Ballymena was the right option, and I wanted to push myself.
Yeah, I think the one thing I noticed as soon as you moved to Ballymena, I suppose, is all the kids sort of seem to be on the same wavelength. There's a big focus on passing and moving, keeping the ball on the floor and moving it quickly, playing using your first and second touch. It was all about finding space and exploiting space.
Yeah, what I noticed straight away was there's a huge difference in fitness. There is also a big difference in ability, but yeah, there is an emphasis on actually playing football, whereas I didn't really know what playing football was. It was literally just get the ball and try and score, whereas it was actually have a purpose to play and try and get the ball in the net.
Yeah, like something as well as we're just talking, and it's just coming back to my memory. When you start to play for Irish League teams and you're pushing on and pushing for reserve spots or whatever, there's more of an individual focus on your position and what your position requires. It's all about doing that job and doing that job well. And that's what the coaches are trying to drill into the kids at a young age. Knowing your position inside out, know where you're meant to be, know where you're meant to be running off the ball as well as when you do have the ball.
Yeah, well, when I moved to Ballymena, I wanted to play centre midfield, and they did play me there. But when I got to like the under 17s, and some coaches would prefer me playing outright, and I noticed fairly quickly that outright it's a demanding spot playing for Ballymena. Like they have you drilled and know what you're doing. Like as soon as someone gets the ball, it's get as wide as you can. Whereas I like to cut inside. Um, so there is a focus on staying wide and knowing what runs to make, whereas previously I didn't really know what runs to make or yeah.
Yeah, it's even just the stuff off the ball. Like I remember Ballymena was playing you on the right wing, and in their system, what they like to do is the right wing and the left wing to crowd the middle of the park when they didn't have the ball.
Yeah, so if the ball's out left, the right winger tucks in, goes centre midfield. So they play basically with three centre midfielders, and try and suck the play out to the very left hand side, so it gets crowded out and they've got nowhere to go, and vice versa on the other side. It's where you really notice tactics are involved in football, whereas, like as I say, I didn't really know what they were before that.
Yeah, I think even at adult level, unless you're playing at a high standard, if you're just messing about with your friends or you're playing old boys league or Sunday league, it's just you pick 11 names and those 11 names play their own individual positions, but there's not really a focus on tactics. But then when you start to move up the levels and you start to play at a higher standard, it's all result based, it's result driven. So then teams start to have their own systems, the way they play. And I remember you came up against Linfield, and I remember the match and how well they were very, very young kids. I think they were 15, 16, but how well they actually kept the ball and how they moved it side to side. Now, you ran them really close, but just remembering how tight they were, how well they kept the ball, how fast they were moving it. Everyone knew what they were meant to be doing.
Yeah, that was what, under 17. That was a semi final of the Northern Ireland Cup, and my goodness, they were some team. And that game is probably one of my most memorable games playing football. And I just remember coming against boys who had played for Northern Ireland, and I wasn't really used to that. Like I have played with boys who have went and played for Northern Ireland, but not at the same time as they were playing for my team. So it was a challenging game, that game, and because you were playing against boys who are quality of football, boys who went across the likes of West Brom and things like that, and you just notice how gifted players are over here and the development over here. Like it's crazy the amount that Northern Ireland's developed over the last few years.
The standard of football in Northern Ireland's definitely improving, and you can see with the likes of the Irish League that more teams are becoming full time. But even if you drop down leagues, you're starting to see that more teams are having more money and they're able to pay for better players. And when you're playing at that high level, it does become pay to play.
Yeah, definitely. Because where I'm playing now, at Chimney Corner, we're intermediate league, and like we've got the likes of St James's Swifts and Belfast Celtic there, and it's all money. Like they're some of the players are getting paid more than you would to play in the Irish League. So why not go down a few levels and get more money?
I think that's something that people maybe don't realise that there is starting to come like money to come into football over here. It's not just the Irish League; it's even playing in the Championship, and even some amateur teams are starting to pay players now.
Yeah, definitely. Most teams now, it's hard to find a team that it's not paying. At the minute, most teams are have money about them, and I don't know really how they get it. It's none of my business, but yeah, definitely there's a whole lot of money going around Northern Ireland for football at the minute.
I think it's very good as well. And obviously, I'm only focusing on really three teams here. You've got Larne, you've got Linfield, you've got Crusaders. Actually, and the fourth would be Glentoran, who are all starting to sort of have some players come on full time. If not all the players are going full time.
Yeah, it just shows the development of football over here. Players coming across the water as well to play over here. Like Lawrence signed someone yesterday playing over in England. And it's good to see. Like the likes of Bastian Harry when he came over from down south. You think, well, the first few weeks watching him, you think, oh my goodness, he is unbelievable. But then you realise a lot of players in the Irish League actually master that, and that shows why there's players also from over here going across the water, like the likes of Joel Cooper and players like that.
Yeah, and Gavin White. Gavin White would probably be the biggest one where he ended up going. I think he's at Cardiff now.
I'm not. I don't know where he is. I think he made a move, but I don't know.
Yeah. Well, anyway, moving on. So we've got two. You're playing under 15s, and you're starting to trial for Milk Cup sides, and your team's also playing. Ballymena is also playing against certain teams in the Milk Cup, and I remember you played against Corinthians, and for you that was quite a humbling experience. But it was also seeing how talented other kids your age were, that are across the water now who are playing in Brazil, and they're playing at an extremely high standard.
Yeah, like I said there, coming up against Linfield, you really notice that there's some players over in this country that are incredibly gifted. But then again, we played Corinthians, and oh my goodness, I've never seen some players like that. There's a guy called Fabricio playing. What I think he was valued at 8 million at the time. Had to see him agent as Neymar. Well, that was what was rumored. And my goodness, I've never played against a player like that. He was going around the pitch, rainbow flicking boys and everything, and you just notice that you think boys over here are good, and then you see that, and it's crazy. They hammered us that game too.
It's a different level. I think the thing that stands out to me about that game and from some of the teams that were coming across to play in the Milk Cup, I remember after the games, there was players giving away their shoes and giving away their boots because they were on sponsorship deals by Nike and Adidas and Puma.
Yeah, I do remember that. Like, there you'd see the spectators even come on the pitch and start asking players for their boots, and the players would give them. And I'm like, what? It cost £200 for a pair of boots. Why are you giving them away? But yeah, it's crazy. I don't really understand it, but yeah.
I remember when we were quite young, we went and we watched Liverpool play in the Milk Cup, and I think it might have been their under 17s or their under 18s, and you've seen some players there like Charavella, and you just see the standard of football and know that, like you're playing at that level, you're the same age as those kids, but how much that standard is, that Liverpool are bringing people in, and you can see that they're picking the very best players in the world.
Yeah, you can think over here that I thought I was half decent at football, but then when you actually watch some of them boys play, you're like, oh my goodness, they're a different level completely. I remember actually going to watch. I think it might have been the Liverpool game, and I remember, or it could have been a County Antrim game actually, and I remember wearing a Barcelona tracksuit. It must have been about 13, 14 at the time, and people thinking I played for Barcelona. I think that's my claim to fame.
That's it.
The
People
people
come
thought I was
asking
playing
you
for
for your autograph.
Barcelona. Yeah, but I don't even think Barcelona were enough.
Yeah, well, I suppose that's how good the Milk Cup is. You see a lot of real big players coming over here, and me and Nathan Best in the last podcast, we talked about some of the players who have came over in the Milk Cup, and he mentioned some real big names. Like you had Sergio Busquets, he came over. You had Verratti. There's a lot of real big players, and I even said about Matthew Longstaff, who's currently playing for Newcastle.
Yeah, again, the standard of football over here is improving, and even the Milk Cup. I don't think it's as big as it was, but my goodness, it still attracts big teams and big players. And it's a humbling experience actually being over here and actually seeing the boys play in the Milk Cup and thinking, County Antrim actually matched that team. There was a lot of players there who could have got on for that, say, Newcastle team that Longstaff was playing for, and now they're playing the Premier League. Yeah.
just on that, I've always believed that there's been very, very talented footballers in Northern Ireland, and for some reason, for some of them at least, it doesn't work out. And I don't know whether that's because of, the pressures outside of football and, just getting caught up in the wrong thing. But Northern Ireland produces very talented footballs from a very early age. But, how would you get from that level to keep them playing the whole way and not let them get distracted?
It's hard. I know a lot of people go over there, and it's just a case of loneliness. You're coming over to a country you don't know. You're trying to chase your dreams, and like if for one reason or another it doesn't work out, and like what are you left with? You leave everything. So it can be a heartbreaking experience for someone over there. And I think the clubs over there at the professional level need to do more. Like I remember not that long ago seeing about that Manchester or the Man City kid who took his life after being released, and you see that, and like what are the clubs doing? They're not doing enough. Sort of when they're releasing players to give them that extra support that they need.
And obviously, I don't really know what it's like over there when you eventually move over and stuff. But I imagine that, playing at that level, even as a young kid, unless they see something special in you, you're just another name to them. In the grand scheme of things in their head, you probably don't really matter. Once they release you, that'll be their contact done. There'll be no support afterwards.
Yeah, well, yeah, I haven't played over there either,
Yeah.
so you're probably not the same wavelength as me. But yeah, you look at the Premier League clubs and you think, what are they doing after they release someone? And how like you need some sort of constant support if you've just lost your dream. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think that's a massive thing over here, just about the Irish League, and I think it's a great thing. We talked about how much money is coming into the Irish League, but another massive positive is that kids that are moving up and they're getting the chance to play in the Irish League, they can follow their dream here now because they can see that they're being paid for it. They don't maybe need to go across the water; they can, but there's also pathways to make it over here.
Yeah, well, what I think is the biggest positive over here is that you can work alongside play football, and you can get paid. Most of the clubs aren't full time, so you can get paid for doing your job, and then as a bit of the side, you get a bit of football money in as well. So yeah, kids can trace their dreams over here as well, although the standard's not as good. It certainly is getting there, and it has progressed over the last few years.
So we'll move on again. So we're at Ballymena. You've turned 15 and you get a call to play in a reserve football match. What was that like?
I was thinking about leaving Balmain at the time. I was thinking about going down to the cruise and I trained with them a few times, and then I don't know, someone must have caught wind of it, and I got a phone call from Joe, the under 17 manager at the time, saying Adam, Paul's off the phone and wants you to go play for him. And we played against Derryaki that game, who Besty's actually playing for now. And I remember going down, coming off the bench, and they played me up front for some reason. I think we got beat as well, but it was an experience. It was a good experience, and I think football just went downhill from there. From going to play Ballymena reserves at 15, and now I'm not at a great standard.
Well, I think to be honest, when we're thinking about football over here, obviously, you're playing at 15 in a reserve level, and already it's very, very physical. But, reserve football doesn't actually prepare you to play first team football at Ballymena, at your Crusaders, at your Linfield, because when you go up and play first team, it's even more physical, it's even more fast paced again.
Yeah, I think over here there's a lot of emphasis on pressing. I think Bessie touched on it last week, and there is that emphasis on pressing. And over in England, you see it. Players have time on the ball, and over here it's very, very fast paced, very in your face. And you don't notice that until you actually play or watch games at a higher level. Like I remember being on the bench for Moyola against Cliftonville, and I remember watching a Cliftonville team playing and thinking, you know what, I've watched them against or on TV. They don't look as good as that, but when you actually play against them, you think actually they play so quick, they play so fast, and they keep the ball so well. And you do notice that big standard improvement. And yeah, again, you don't really, and reserve football over here, it doesn't prepare you because the clubs just buy the players and they want. I think it's just good to look at an academy and think, oh, we've actually got an academy here.
Yeah, I think what you mentioned is you watch Cliftonville on TV or you watch your Linfield, your Crusaders on TV, and you think about the standard there, and you think, well, maybe this isn't as good. But then when you're actually watching that live, and you can see what every player's doing individually, you can see how good they actually are. I think a good example playing at playing at the highest level. I remember when I was very young, and I think it was maybe 13, 14, and I went over to watch Liverpool play, and Liverpool were playing Bolton, and I remember watching Sammy Hippie at the back. Now it was a very very quiet game for Sammy Hippie, but I remember seeing him and being like, that man is a man mountain. He doesn't miss tackles, he doesn't miss headers. He's always at where he's meant to be, and you can see at the very highest level, it's all the stuff off the ball that matters as well.
Yeah, definitely. Off the ball is probably more important than on the ball. Well, I would say anyway. Teams have to keep their shape and have to be composed off the ball. And a lot of focus is now on counter-attacking football, like you see it with Jurgen Klopp. That as soon as you lose the ball, back in straight in as a unit and work hard to win the ball back, and then counter-attack from there.
I think just mentioning Jurgen Klopp, you can see that the pressing's there. But it's also the wee things that you notice when you're watching it. Like if you watch Thiago and off the ball, he's constantly looking over his shoulder. He's constantly glancing. He knows exactly what's going on, where people are running to. He knows where everybody is. At the same time, that's why his passing's so good. Obviously, he's got the technique there, but he also knows where people's going to be. So when he gets the ball, he knows exactly where he's giving it to.
Yeah, even if you look at the likes of Frank Lampard, like you always see that famous look over the shoulder and just every couple of seconds, just knowing what's around you. And I think that's what separates a lot of players, just knowing what's around them and who to pass the ball to or what's going on around them.
I'm not quite sure what the show's called, but I remember. Do you remember the street soccer? And it was with Wayne Rooney, and he was like trying to find the next striker.
Yeah, street striker.
And I remember the ad for that, and it was Wayne Rooney talking, and he sort of said in the interview, he was like, "I know what's going to happen 15 seconds before what actually happens."
Yeah, it's all about that instinct, and again, that's what separates. Like you can have all the ability in the world, but if you don't have that instinct, you're not going to go very far. Like you look at Thiago, he's definitely a fair few seconds ahead of most players, and he knows what's going on. So I think it's important that like I remember, like, not that he's 15 seconds ahead of everyone, but I remember playing for Ballymena reserves, and Stephen Mcclelland dropped down to play for us. He's playing centre midfield. He's now Belfast Celtic manager. And I remember just watching him thinking, oh my goodness, this man is unbelievable. Just so far ahead of everyone and just one touch passing. You do see the standard when you go up at them levels and the players that are coming down.
You can really notice it. The way me and you have played in some charity games and or even watch games or watching you play at a reserve level, and you see sometimes when players who have played in the Irish League or have dropped down or they're playing in these charity games. And you can see it's all the wee small things that they do, shielding the ball at the right time, sticking their bum out, making themselves big, making themselves hard to move. It's like all the wee small things that you start to notice when you're actually seeing it live.
Yeah, all the small things add up, sort of thing. And you do notice, like, people really work hard. Like Bestie said in the podcast you done with him about playing in the championship and people working outside of training, um, like the actual football training and doing their own thing. And I think that's probably the most important thing over here, that people are training and taking football serious off the pitch as well. Like they're going out runs, they're doing their own cardio, they're doing their own strength based training. So yeah, you do notice it, and the wee things really do make a difference. Like this season in particular, I worked so hard on my fitness. And I would notice it. I would notice that I was running a whole lot more. I would be faster to the ball, quicker to the ball, and it's the wee things they make such a difference.
Yeah, just on that, working hard and doing your own thing. But it brings me back to playing reserve team football, and I think a massive benefit to you was going from playing. So you play for Ballyclare reserves, and that's still a very very good standard. You're working your way to play for Ballyclare first team, but it doesn't prepare you for actually playing first team football. And then when you move to Moyola and it's adult football, you're getting paid to play. Everybody's being paid to play, and you can see the standard because you're now playing with men. You're not playing with people your own age. You're not playing with 18, 19-year-olds. You're playing with boys who are in their 30s, who have played in the Irish League, who know what it takes, who know what to do.
Yeah, I think I didn't really notice much of a difference in ability going from, say, reserve teams to going to the likes of Moyola. The only difference you really notice is physicality and fitness. The boys will be a lot stronger, and that's what I wanted. I wanted to go play football where it would be a challenge physically, because I knew I'm not physically all there yet. So there isn't much of a difference in ability, because a lot of the players that I've played with, technically they're unbelievable. But yeah.
I think people will be interested to know that, at your time at Ballymena, before you moved, you were playing in the same team as Kofi Balmer, and, I think Matthew Shevlin had just left it the year before you went up, or he went to play first team football, sorry, at Ballymena. What could you notice about Kofi's game that sort of made him at that Irish League standard?
Well, I remember the first few times I played with Kofi, there was one game me and Kofi played centre midfield, and you do notice Kofi is he's a fantastic player, and he's ahead of the boys that we were playing with, just reading the game. But Kofi, he's all I can say is he's an excellent player. And you do notice it. You do notice that he was better than everyone there, and that's why he went up so quickly. Like, you look at the likes of Chevy, who he was nearly away to Crystal Palace with Ballymena stopped it. Or you look at Kofi, who's going to Ballymena the first team, and you do notice they are ahead of the boys that are playing reserve football. So there is still that big difference.
Yeah. I suppose just moving on, you mentioned briefly about playing for Moyola and playing against big games against Cliftonville. But also in that Moyola team, your goalkeeper, he used to play for Glentoran. I think your centre midfielder Danny used to play in the Irish League. You had a lot of really talented players in that Moyola side, and it was the same for every team in that league.
Yeah, all the teams in that team. I wouldn't say there's a bad team in it. Well, actually, Desert Martin, but you do notice a lot of the players have played at that level and they know what it's like, and they're just down there. They get a few quid and they're getting older. Yeah, like the likes of Chris, he played for Ballymena, and when watching Chris play, you would notice his touch was just miles above everyone else's, and he knew where the net was. But again, not all the teams were there technically with their ability. It is a case of strength and fitness.
Mm-hmm. And if young kids or young men are listening to this, and they're at that sort of standard where they want to start playing up and they start want to play senior football, what can they do that's going to make them adapt quickly to the physical side of the game?
Hit the gym, hit the gym and go out running. What I tried to do was just constant running, and go out running, play in all the games I could just to get myself physically there. Like, I remember playing for Moyola pre-season, and things were going great. Things were going fantastic, and we played like 5 games pre-season. I like scored 3 and set up 5, and I was thinking, my goodness, I'm in this team. But then again, as you say, results based, and you're out of the team as quick as you can get into it.
Yeah, so it's really, once you get your opportunity, it's taking it with both hands, but then trying to cement your place. And for me speaking, obviously I'm your brother and I'm biased, but I think what you start to realize is that because it is results driven, you went into that Moyola team at what, 19 years old? And
19, yeah, I think so.
And you're not all physically there yet. You've still got growing to do. And there's men coming in who are playing centre mid, who are playing out on the wing, and they are more physical. So sometimes when a manager looks at that, they think, well, this is a physical game. We need physical players.
Yeah, going back to what you said of what advice could you give, like, you will notice that you'll be out of the team as quick as you can get in. So just keep working hard, keep going at it. And sometimes it's just not the right team for you. But yeah, as I say, the results are driven. That's going to influence any manager's decision when they have to get results and they're fighting for their job in reality. And like, they're paying all these players. Like, you'll see players getting £100 a week, you'll see players getting £50 a week. But when you're new to a team and you're young, and you're not getting as much money as they are, they sort of have to play them players, sort of thing, because they're paying them that much.
Yeah, it sort of has to be that they're justifying the decision to pay these players that amount of money.
Yeah, so they have to play. Like, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you play a player you're giving £100 a week to, as opposed to some wee kid that's just come up? Yeah.
I think that's actually a very valid point, because if you look at the very highest level of football, the very highest, you look at Man United. Man United's not playing Donny van de Beek at the minute, who's, what was he, 30 million? And what's United fans saying? What's the criticism? The criticism is you've got a £30 million player there and you're not using him.
Yeah, well, I think obviously Solskjaer knows what he's doing at the end of the day, and although he is paying this, I think that's what separates the good managers. Although he is being paid that much money, or they have paid that much money for him, a good manager will look at what do you call your wee man, Scott McTominay. You'll look at him and say well, I'm not paying him as much money, but he's doing a better job, so we'll stick him in.
Yeah, but I think the point is, though, that when you're playing in the Irish League, you're playing the Championship, and you're playing in the first division, wherever you're playing, especially maybe at a lower level where there's not as much money. You know, if you're paying someone big bucks, you know, the fans and even the manager and the people who are paying the wages, the board, are wanting to see that player pay. You know, so managers over here are under a lot of pressure. You know, I think Belfast Celtic had two centre backs who they were playing. You know, quite a bit of money.
Yeah, the word was £500.
Yeah, so if a manager's going to drop someone who's getting paid that, you know, they have some serious answering to do to the people above them as well.
Yeah, definitely. You don't notice it, but there is like a dictatorship in football with boards, and you'll see that like with every football team. Everything, like, look at Chelsea, they sacked Frank Lampard, Abramovich, because he can do it, and because they weren't getting results. So it's very cutthroat football, and when you're not getting the results after all that money you've paid for players, like, you're gone.
Yeah, I think that's sometimes the harsh part about football is that it's very cutthroat from a very early age. You know what? See, if you're 11, 12, 13, 14 years old and you're not cutting it playing for that Irish League team, you can guarantee that the next season after that, they will bring someone in to replace you and tell you you're not good enough.
Yeah, like even the likes of Lauren and that boy they just signed plays left wing, because the fans were giving stick that the left winger wasn't good enough, and as quickly as that, there's a replacement then, as soon as.
Yeah, I suppose when you're talking about the Irish League, it is results based, and there is fans there, and that does increase pressure. But I think the hardest part about football is, you know, when you watch football, you don't really think that you're watching individuals as such. You know, that individual has thoughts, that individual has feelings. And, you know, there's been players over here who have absolutely been butchered online. And, you know, they're reading those tweets, they're reading those comments about their performances.
Yeah, I don't, football is it's not a nice place. You'll see that over the last few weeks, like with the racism with the United players, like the likes of Rashford being racially abused by his own fans. Like, it's a cutthroat place, and if a player's not playing well, on top of that adds to, like, Rashford. He's played phenomenal, but yeah, even it just adds more fuel to the fire if the player is out of form.
I think probably something that you could say is that football or any professional sport or semi-professional, when you start getting paid to play, you know, it's a whole new level of seriousness, and the highs are high, but the lows are lower.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I've had my high points and low points in football, and like the highs are really high and the lows are really low. Like, like at stages I was thinking of giving up football at such a young age. But yeah, any advice I could give would just be keep motoring on, and if it's not working out for you now, it'll be working out for you in 6 months or a year's time. So don't put that pressure on yourself.
I think that's very, very valid to say. Just thinking about young players coming up, and maybe it's not working for them at that stage, but you know, a lot can change. A lot can change in 6 months. You know, you can get taller, you can get bigger, you can get stronger. You know, results may go more for you. You know, the highs are high and the lows are low, but things change very quickly. People forget, you know, if you're in a bad run of form, it's not worrying about it and just keep pressing on, like you said.
Yeah. Well, for me, like when I wasn't playing well, I turned to God, and like although the lows were low, like I can honestly say that God helped me through that and helped me move on, and he's blessed me with so much in regards to my football. And even though I'm not playing at a high level, as I would like, I'm enjoying football again. So yeah.
That's the most important thing, is enjoying football. You know, results results change, but as long as you're enjoying playing, that's the main thing. And then worry about playing up later on. You know, make sure you're happy first, because you're playing football at the very start. You're playing football for the fun of it. You're not playing for results. You're not playing to get paid. You're playing because you love it.
Yeah. Well, that's why I left Moyola, that, and the fact that every time I played, my calves were on fire. With them flat feet. So after I got them insoles and all, and that was half the battle. And then when you go to a team where you actually enjoy playing football again, that's the full battle's been won.
Could you talk about that? Talk about what you mean about your calves, because I think that's very valid.
Yeah, for a lot of years since about under 17, I noticed I had bad calf pains, and I thought, flip, I've just got shin splints or something. Um, and I wouldn't really want to rest because I didn't like missing any games. So the likes of playing for Ballymena, I was playing, but playing half-heartedly because my calves were always just in agony. Um, so I went and got insoles made, and just changed my game. I can run again.
That is a big thing. You know, injuries play a part in anyone's career, and your injury wasn't really stopping you from playing, but it was stopping you from playing to your full potential, because you're always sore.
Yeah, like every game, I was in pain. Like I couldn't play a game without thinking, "My goodness, I have to come off." Like I remember playing a few games where, like, I played against the Crews. It was for Ballymena reserves, and I'd scored two, and I had to go off at half time just because my calves were that sore. Um, so yeah, like no matter what injury you get, it's going to be a setback. Like I'm so thankful that I haven't had like any big injuries. But like the calf one, although I was playing through it, it's still just a hindrance to the game.
It's even the psychology of it as well that maybe you didn't realize at the time, but your body's natural reflex is that when something's hurting, you change the way you run. If it is your legs are the problem. Your body tries to adjust itself so it doesn't hurt as bad. You know, so you, without even realizing, you're probably losing, you know, your explosiveness just solely for the fact that your legs were sore and that was your body's way of coping. You know, not putting too much pressure, not being able to explode off.
Yeah, it does make a big difference to your whole game. Like I would say, my game was probably at most 50% of what I could actually play, just because it was so sore playing all the time, and I didn't really speak to anyone about it or tell anyone about it. I probably would have got a better solution. I just thought I've got garlic calves, and that was it.
Yeah, there wasn't much you could do. Well, you mentioned briefly there, you were talking about how God's helped you through things, and obviously me and yourself are both Christians, and you know, God's played a massive part in my life, but I know He's played a massive part in your life as well. Tell me about that.
Well, growing up, I grew up in a Christian family, obviously, and I am so thankful for both mummy and daddy and you. Um, and I grew up knowing the ways of God and knowing what to do and what not to do. And I started doing them things that I wasn't supposed to do at about 12 years old, and that and escalated into addiction. And I don't want to get into what I was addicted to or whatever, but because all addictions are the same. But I remember just being stuck in a complete another rut, being so sad all the time of what I was doing and wanting to get away from it so bad. Like you don't notice with people with addictions, a lot of them want to get out of what they're doing. They don't want to be in it anymore, and it breaks their heart that they're still in it. But addiction's a thing that you're enslaved to. It's a habit or a practice that you're enslaved to, and doctors say it's not something you can be cured from. So the fact that I'm able to stand here today or sit here today and say I'm completely free from it is the best thing ever. Like I went for years with just, I remember just crying all the time. God, why won't you take this away from me? I don't want to do it, but I'm still doing it anyway. And I think the biggest thing I can say for that, anyone who's ever struggled with addiction or struggling with addiction now, how I got free from it was I realized that it wasn't hurting me, that it was hurting God. That all my sin and all my addiction, it was actually hurting God's heart. It was hurting my heart too, but it was hurting God's heart, and that's how it freed me. And I remember just coming home from, I think it was church one night, and mommy and daddy were bringing you to work, and I asked them to drop me at the house because I had homework to do. But no, I was under a severe amount of conviction, and I can't, for people who aren't Christians, I can't really explain it to you. But when you feel convicted about something, I can honestly tell you that there's such a thing as God, and because I've never felt anything like that. And when I got to that table and prayed for God to come into my heart, the feeling of peace, the feeling of love that I've had, I have never experienced anything like it. So I would encourage you, anyone who's struggling, anyone who's even not struggling, honestly, go even pray to God and see if his presence will come down to you.
Something that you said there that really stood out to me is, you were going through a really hard time, and we don't need to get into that. But the thought that was going through my head is, the harshest fires bring the brightest gold. The refiner's fire. When you're thrown into the fire, that's the good that remains. And you were on a journey, you were on a path that God was in control of, and you just needed to get to that place to where you finally understood what everything meant. And for you, that was understanding that yes, you were sinning, but your sin wasn't just hurting you, it was hurting God. And that was the path that you were on. And for other people, the journey that they're on might be different. It might not be, what they might need to realize is about self-love. That might be the journey that they're on. It might be that they know that God loves them and that he's not upset at them.
Yeah,
There's so many different journeys that people are on, and no journey's ever the same. We're all individuals, but because of your story, you're able to share and you're able to help people. And that's all part and parcel of what being a Christian is. And people always think that Christians are boring individuals and we're not allowed to do certain things. But what the matter is that Christians are broken people who have a savior who loves them. And that's all being a Christian is. Being a Christian is loving Jesus. That's it in its simplest form. We're not bound by rules or regulations, but what we're bound by is love.
yeah. And I don't know what I would do without it, to be honest. Like I've went through so many difficult times. Like I remember going and not getting into university. It broke my heart, because I was just seeing all my friends going to university, and there was me just sitting there with nothing and no plan for my life. I felt like my life had been ripped apart. And although that's not really, I wouldn't look back at that and say that's a crisis, but at the time I would say I was in a crisis because I didn't know what to do, and it was a crisis for me. So I remember literally being so down and so sad about my situation that I began to feel depressed, and to know that God actually loved me is the saving grace in that story. That God loved me and that He had a plan for my life, and although I didn't understand it, although I was so down with myself, I knew that God had a plan for my life, and just to trust Him. And I think getting or not getting into uni, that really built a seed of faith in me that things may come bad against me, like my eyes or whatever. Things may come against me, but I know God has a plan in it, and I can trust that, and I can have peace in all bad situations.
I think a massive thing as a Christian is the sense of peace that we have. And sometimes we don't always have peace, because in the middle of a storm it's very hard to have peace at times. But that peace is always there. And our peace is this. Our peace is knowing that God loves us, knowing that we have a place to go, a place that we can run to. And I suppose in my own life, without getting into my testimony or getting into it, but what changed for me is, I've been a Christian. I was a Christian since I was 11, 12 years old. I can't remember the date. And the thing that I always struggled with, and I believed I was saved and I was saved, was that God actually loved me. That's what I found hard to believe. And, that led into difficulties when I got older, because I didn't really fully believe that. I thought, maybe the things I was doing was too bad, or whatever. But the thing that really changed for me is just, one night I was in church, and I was at the back of a youth center, and I remember everybody just singing, and I remember going through a really hard time in my life, and I remember just saying to God, I don't really know what's happening right now, but I'm going to trust you. And in my own way, I was saying to God, God, I'm going to trust you because I know that you love me and you want what's best for me. And see, as soon as I said those words in my own way, the peace that I felt, that I've never felt peace like it before in my life. And it was just me saying to God, I trust you.
Yeah, and
And
go
sorry, go
ahead.
ahead.
No, you go.
So all I was saying was that, when you're going through that storm, see if you're a Christian and you're going through a storm and you feel like you're alone in it, know that you're not. And like Adam said, it's the harshest fires that make the brightest gold. You're not alone, and there's a purpose to it. And you might not know the purpose now. You might not even know the purpose for years to come, but know that God loves you and that God is for you. And if
Yeah, especially what you were saying there, about, you know, that pace that comes around you, even when you were in probably one of the most difficult times of your life. And having that pace, like even for a non-Christian out there that's experienced such tremendous heartache, or even at the minute with even COVID going about, and you feel like there's nothing to do, or you can't get away from something, or you can't even get away from this virus, and you're maybe feeling alone. Call out to God. He'll answer you. He's a God who loves you and a God who cares for you. And just because you're not a Christian doesn't mean he won't still come down. And honestly, any time that I've called on God, he has answered me. And why can't he do the same for you?
that's very true, and I agree with everything you're saying. But just to touch on a few things, in both of our lives we've experienced, me and you as a whole, we've had very happy, very good lives. But there's still been times when things maybe haven't gone our way, which is completely normal. And we felt anxious, and we felt sad. At times you can even feel depressed. Like there's times where I felt depressed, and maybe that's went on for a few months of just feeling that you're in such a rut. And there's many people out there, that are going to listen to this, and maybe you're going through an anxious time, a time that's maybe not going the best, and maybe you don't know the Lord, or maybe you do, but the advice stays the same. Turn to God, and this podcast, this podcast is a platform for people to tell stories about their life, and it's not always going to be Christian based, but the people that I'm going to have on this podcast, some of them will be Christians, and feel free to reach out and talk to either myself or talk to you or Bestie just about what you're going through, and we're happy to listen. I'm happy to use this platform for positive things to come.
Yeah, I think what you touched on there is when you go through a hard time, um, you might know why you're going through it at the time, but like when I was feeling so down about myself, I didn't know God would use that to speak to thousands of people, to speak to maybe even hundreds of thousands of people. Like I didn't know that when I was feeling so down about myself, when I was sitting in the shower, I remember sitting in the shower crying about how my life was going, and not knowing what my purpose was, and not knowing basically what to do. And feeling so sad. I remember I didn't know that would be used in times to come. So even if you're going through a hard time, that God might use that in times to come, just to help someone else.
Yeah, just something that you were saying there about God using your story and God giving you a platform to talk, and that's what I really want to touch on now. We've touched on your testimony, but I would like you just to touch on your spoken words. How did that come about?
Oh, they came about in school, upper sixth. I remember giving my testimony in the well, and I remember at the end of my testimony, I wrote like a wee short poem about addiction. But I can't even remember most of the words now. But it was about being trapped, the addiction. And yeah, so I went back to school. After that, everything went well, and Yeah, I was doing my A levels, and I already knew I hadn't get into what I wanted to do, social work, because I failed my interview, and I was in a bad place. And then I got a text from Stevie, I think it was, asking me could I do a spoken word at the next event. And of course I said yes. And it so happened to be that I would talk about being down or feeling a wee bit depressed. In that spoken word, and then that spoken word went and reached, I would even say, hundreds of thousands of people. Um, just from God using that situation.
And obviously, you're talking about reaching hundreds of thousands of people, and I'm going to share it later on my page. Just whenever this podcast is released, I'll share it. But that was you giving a spoken word, and you were giving a spoken word, I'd say, to about over 1,000 people, and that was filmed, and then that was put on YouTube where other pages shared it, and you know it went viral to an extent.
Yeah, so I stuck it up on Facebook, and I sent it to a few Christian pages, and a few of them shared it. Unfortunately, now one of the pages, probably the biggest page, is now deleted, so I can't really even get it back on that. But it's not about the views that it got, as long as it reached one person and helped them through it. I remember that night, that spoken word was done, and looked to be a part of a service where 5 people's lives were changed, and it is the biggest blessing to actually see that the work that God has done in you has actually reached someone. That's crazy to me.
Something that I would like to talk about, which is so important, is every day in Northern Ireland and across the UK, you hear about people who are ending their lives because the mental pressure has got too much for them, that they felt alone, they felt lost, they felt scared, that there's no way out. And something that really spoke to me, I think, is I remember when I was 14 years old, and I remember being on the bus, and the bus was going down the Ballysillan, and there was an advertisement on the bus, and the bus said this: 1 in 5 people will suffer with mental health. And I was thinking to myself, who suffers with mental health? That's not me. And fast forward a few years, and I was on the same boat. I was struggling, and I needed help. And there's so many people out there who currently need help. And I think the important thing to know is that you're not alone. You're not the only person who has went through what you're going through. And it's important to find good help, to find the right help, to talk to people who you're closest to tell them your problems. And I think a problem shared is a problem halved.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And the 1 in 5, you'll see how prevalent mental health issues are in Northern Ireland now. It's went up to 1 in 4 people now experience a mental health issue in their lifetime. And it's something that I'm very passionate about. Like, you see COVID going about over here, and you'll hear nothing about the actual suicide crisis that is going on in this country. And it's crazy. They don't tell you the actual figures, but you'll see it on Facebook of someone or someone that has a friend that will have taken their lives. And it's such a sad thing to think that people feel like they have no way out. But yeah, as you say, Joyce, a problem shared is a problem halved. And honestly, you don't have to suffer alone. And although at the minute you may feel like everything's against you, there are people out there who care for you, and there are people out there who'll listen. So yeah, just take that first step and talk to someone if
Just talk
it's
to
happening.
anyone to open up. There's so many things that you can be struggling with, but it's important. It's important to air it out to an extent, because what I found in my own life and listening to other people is that you often make the problem worse than it actually is by bottling it up and keep it inside, because your mind runs wild. Your mind creates situations that hasn't happened, or maybe over exaggerates what's actually going on. And see, when you're talking to someone who is anxious, or you're the anxious person, the thoughts that you're going to be having, you're not going to be in your right mind. You're having anxious thoughts in that moment. And it's important to share, because when you talk to someone else, they can look at it from a sound mind and be able to speak into your problem. Speak into it with rationale.
Yeah, definitely there are people out there who care for you and that will listen to you. And even if you don't think your family care or your friends care, there will be people out there who care for you and you're willing to listen to you. Like even if you look at the likes of Lifeline or things like that, people out there genuinely do care. And it's not right just to suffer in silence. So do take that first step and do talk to someone.
So we'll move past this, and we're talking. I want to talk about some of the. Obviously, we still got to talk about two other things, but first we'll talk about your eyes. Your eyes first. So obviously you got bad news about your eyesight. Talk about that.
So yeah, I went to Specsavers just over a year ago, maybe not even. And they couldn't work out why on the eye test I didn't have a prescription. And I took the senior practitioner at Specsavers to notice that there was something wrong with my eye, or my eyes. And he said, I think you might have keratoconus. So I was sent to the Royal, where they did all the tests, and yeah, it turned out I had keratoconus. What that is, for people who don't know, is basically the cornea of your eye, instead of growing in a sphere shape, it starts to grow in a cone shape. So it affects the way light gets into your eye. So for words, I would sometimes see double. So I would say the words here, I would see the word here also below it. And then also it affects light, as I say. Like if I'm out and about and there's really bright lights, I really don't like it. It's just sore. But yeah, I got that news wasn't bad. But then when I found out my eyesight had deteriorated by a whole lot, that was when I thought that was the bad news. So fast forward a year later, on the 19th of October, on my birthday, I went to hospital, and they told me my eyesight had deteriorated and I needed an operation. So I got that operation, and where are we now? Just January. Sort of December time, I think they told me, or November. They told me the operation hadn't went as successful as I'd hoped, and I still have this haze over my eye. So I'm one in 1,000 people who the doctor said he's never seen the 1 in 1,000. So I'm in the 1 in 1,000 people who still have this haze over their eye after the operation. So it's my eyesight's still very blurry, and I have to go to hospital for the check on the other eye, which is deteriorating as well. But at the same time, that was bad news at the time. I remember getting that news of the operation on my birthday and crying about it. But now I can look back at it and say, you know what? Whatever happens, it's meant to be. I have peace about this whole situation, and if God wants to heal me, He'll heal me. If my eyesight's supposed to get better, it'll get better. I have very much have peace. If I'm going to go blind, I have peace that that's the way it's meant to be. So yeah.
I think obviously that's something that's really serious, and as your brother, it's hard to hear almost. But I would encourage that if you're listening to this podcast and you're listening to what Adam's saying, that you can find peace and you can find the situation. But if you're a born again Christian, or even if you're not a Christian, I would urge you just to pray for my brother's eyes, and just pray that it would get better. But the amazing thing is that that you've stayed so positive for the entire thing, that you have that peace. And there's also a lot of positives. It's not all negatives that's going on at the minute. There's a lot of positives going on in your life, and probably the biggest positive is that at the minute you're training to be a social worker. That you didn't get in first time, but you get in now. You're training to be a social worker, and you're going to help a whole lot of people.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I love people. So that's why I decided I wanted to go into social work, and I hated seeing people hurt. And I don't think anyone needs to hurt in this world. There's too much hurt in the world to go around for us all. So I thought if I could make a difference, then definitely I want to do that. So I know I didn't get in first time, and again, that was probably the biggest blessing in disguise, that I wasn't ready to go into social work at that time. And yeah, I'm here now, and I've been on replacement on offered an actual job doing the thing I love. So, yeah.
I would say this as well, that because of social worker and because of the things that you've went through in your life, you can sympathize. A massive part of being a social worker is having empathy. Even to work in the NHS or any care setting, the thing that's being promoted the most is empathy, being able to understand someone's situation and being able to speak into that situation. You're going to be responsible for a lot of individuals getting the care that they deserve and that they should receive. And it's amazing that you're going to be a part in their care and their story.
Yeah. Being or working in that social work team, like you would hear some stories and they would break your heart. But it's people that are going through real life situations and real life crises. But so to be able to be there and navigate them or help navigate them through it is honestly such a blessing.
As your brother, I can honestly say that I'm so proud of the person that you've become, and I can see that over the last few years that you've matured, that you've grew as a person, and it's a privilege for you to come on here and to talk about your story, and it's amazing. So I want to thank you for that.
Oh, no problem. No problem.
Is there anything you would like to say before we end?
Oh, stay safe, everybody, and don't go out and be a madman. Stay indoors if you can.
That's it. Stay indoors, protect the NHS.
And listen to James' podcast.
Yes, that's it. Listen, as we're coming to that, if you would like to follow me on Facebook, it's at Josh Talks, and Twitter, it's Josh Talks Free. So follow on Spotify. Please like and share. It's very important. The more likes and shares that I get, the more this can grow and can be a real platform to do good. I want to get obviously interesting people in and provide really good content, but I also want it to be a platform where people can get help and, can grow that way. So feel free to like and share. If you have any questions about either me and Adam's story or the podcast, get in touch. We'd love to reach out to you. We'd love to connect. But yeah, stay safe, everybody, and rest easy. Bye bye.